The first thing you'll need for developing iOS apps is to become an Apple developer. You can do that at developer.apple.com and then click on the Member Center area. This will allow you to log in. In order to log in, you have to create an Apple ID, which if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you probably already have one. And then you have to have a developer account. And a developer account is easy to get. It just requires a little bit of information, your Apple ID, and $99 a year. So now that we've got that, let's log in. This is the Member Center, and this is an area which you'll have to become very familiar with for releasing your apps and also creating some capabilities in your applications and distributing to hardware. The first thing you'll need is the SDK and Xcode, and that's with this link here. And you get the various platform tools from here. The Member Center doesn't just cover iOS, it also covers the Mac OS X and watchOS. And you can see we can also get our Xcode environment and Swift here. So we'll be working with Xcode and Swift, and we'll be showing you those in the next lesson. So you'll have to download and install those. And then the next area that you'll spend a lot of time in is certificates, identifiers, and profiles. The first thing you'll need is a certificate. The certificate is a signing certificate for your applications. And initially you won't have any, and if you click on Add, it'll step you through the steps. You can get various types of certificates for development and also for actually shipping your application to the App Store. So we'll just start one. We'll just get a development certificate. And when I hit continue, it will give you the instructions. The first thing you'll need to do is to create a CSR on your Mac. And of course, you do require a Mac to build iOS applications as well. Once you have the CSR, you upload it and follow the other steps, and it will create a certificate for you. Once you have a certificate and you want to create an application, you need to create an application ID. And you give your app a description. The prefix is already filled in, and a bundle ID. The bundle ID has to be a unique name for the application. In general, the best way to start a unique name is to use your web address or domain name in reverse. So for me, it's com.mooseworks software. And then the application name. And we'll just put in my app name. And you can't use any special characters other than the dots. Then you describe any special services that you're going to be adding to the application. App groups, associated domains, data protection, HealthKit, HomeKit, Apple Pay. One of our favorites, and Apple's favorites, is already pre-checked in-app purchasing. And the other features. Once your application is registered, you'll have an app ID, and you'll want to be able to test that application on devices. And you can't do that just straight out of the chute. You won't be able to distribute it to anyone else except to debug on your own machine. So you can add various devices to your list. You get 99 of them. And to add a device, you just give it a name, and you need the device's unique identifier. In order to distribute to that device, prior to actually releasing to the App Store, you need a provisioning profile. And you can create a provisioning profile. We'll just create an ad hoc profile. Ad hoc means I want to be able to distribute it to devices not going through the App Store. Essentially, I want to run a beta program, so I want to distribute it to various people who would test the application for me. You pick an app ID, and we created that app ID in a previous step. Then we choose the appropriate certificate. In this case, I just have one that's associated with that kind of ID. And then however many devices I want to choose to be able to distribute this particular app to. And finally, give it a profile name. One of the things I've noted is that I end up with a lot of provisioning profiles. depending on what you're going to be doing and how many apps you're going to create, and for who, you may end up with a lot of provisioning profiles as well. I found that naming them appropriately so that things are clear is very helpful, because the provisioning profile is key in distributing the application. Once you finish this process, you click on Generate, and it will create a provisioning profile for you, and then you can download that. Once it's downloaded, you drag it over into the Xcode, and it will be registered on your device. And then you'll be able to ship your application to the devices that you've called out for this provisioning. So those are the 4 sections that we'll be using in the Certificates, Identifiers, and Profiles area. Going back into the Member Center, the other area that we'll need is iTunes Connect. iTunes Connect is required in order to be able to ship your application through the App Store. The odd thing is, you actually have to sign in to iTunes Connect separately as opposed to the Developer Center. iTunes Connect you could think of as more of the business end as opposed to the technical end. The first area we want to visit is My Apps. And we can create an application here. And we'll create a new application. And we have to give it a name. And that's going to be the name that shows up in the store. So be careful with that. You also have to choose a primary language and a bundle identifier. And this is the bundle identifier that we created in the Developer Center. So this already has to exist. We'll put in a version number and a SKU. The SKU can be anything depending upon your system. And then we'd click Create, and we'll create an application. So I'm not going to create that application, but I'll show you what you have when you do create one. And we'll go through this in a release, but the basic idea is that this will create your store listing. So you're going to be required to have screenshots, and they have to be a particular resolution. You'll need, of course, the name of the application, a description, and this is the description that shows up in the store, keywords for searching your application, support, marketing, and privacy policy URLs, an application icon, which again has to be a particular resolution, and various other information that's required to be filled in. Once you've filled in all this information, you also need to upload your application with your build, and you'll do that in Xcode, and we'll take a look at that later on in the course. Once the build is uploaded and all the information is filled in, you can submit the application for review. And at that point, it's in Apple's hands, and they will do some testing on the application. It can take a week or 2 weeks for the application to pass through testing the first time around. It also depends upon the level of complication of the application and the features that it uses. Of course, applications within app purchasing are reviewed a little bit more tightly than applications that aren't. So that's the basic idea in My Applications. Going back to the iTunes Connect dashboard, once your application is released, you can see app analytics, you can see your sales and trends. There's also an area, a business area for your payments and financial reports if your application is for sale. You'll also initially be required to sign some agreements and provide banking information again if you use sales or in-app purchasing. You can also create users and different roles for use for iTunes Connect. So these are the areas that you'll spend a fair amount of time setting up your application and managing it once it's in the store. So now that we've got this kind of setup information done, the next lesson we'll take a look at running in Xcode and building our first application.